What we have right here is the brand new Samsung Galaxy S21. This is the base model out of the three, which is essentially the phone you'd be buying if you wanted the latest specs from Samsung, the latest flagship, but you didn't want to spend over $1,000. So for the first time in a long time, Samsung changed their normal trend. Every year they increase the price of almost every single model, and this year with the S21, they actually dropped the price compared to last year, and this one's selling at just under $800. Now, there's a couple things people complained about with how they dropped the price, and I'll talk about that throughout this video, but overall, I think this phone is really impressive. It delivers a lot of the really big flagship specs, the processor, the storage, and everything you're really looking for. But of course, coming in at $800 is a very competitive price. So with that being said, let's get into this video. The first thing I want to start off with is just a physical tour. I think within the first couple minutes, you'll see what people were complaining about, but honestly, I'm not sure that those are really a big drawback. So starting off on the back, you'll see that there are several different colors. I believe there's 3 or 4 different colors. I'll show them on the screen right now. And this one right here, I think looks really clean, the white and silver, and all the way around the phone, you have the rails are made of aluminum, of course, so it should be pretty durable, and we'll take a look at that in just one second. But on the back, the white back here is actually made of plastic. And this is the first thing people were complaining about. When you're buying a flagship phone, they wanted a glass back, as we're seeing on the S21 Plus, and of course last year's Galaxy S20. It's very common to see glass backs on flagship phones. But with that being said, the plastic back is honestly something that I almost prefer. Now, don't get me wrong, I love a good premium glass back on a phone, but plastic does have its advantages. So first of all, you're not going to get fingerprints on this one. It really doesn't have as much of a shine to it, so even if there were fingerprints, you really wouldn't see them. On top of that, it is more durable, so it's less likely to shatter. I mean, maybe you could get a scratch on it, but I've done a lot of polling, and it turns out a lot of people actually prefer plastic backs. And people who don't prefer plastic backs, I mean, many of them end up using a case anyway. So the plastic back, while it did get a lot of attention and a lot of people complained, I don't think is really a big drawback. I'm happy they did that. That's one of the ways to cut cost that I think is pretty harmless. It's really hard to see the difference, but if it saves money, it's good to drive the price down. Now, looking on the top left, you'll see we have our camera bump there, our 3 cameras, 64 megapixel telephoto lens, and then 12 megapixel wide angle and ultra wide angle lens next to our flash. Something you'll notice is that this just like the Galaxy S21 Plus, doesn't actually have a microphone on the back anywhere. I believe the microphone is going to be on the top and on the bottom. So we'll test that out in the video test to see how that actually sounds. But it also doesn't have any kind of LiDAR, any kind of depth camera, anything like that on the back, which I think is fine. A nice, clean aesthetic. And I mean, the overall aesthetic of this phone, I think it looks really good. You guys can leave a comment and let me know what you think of this. But as far as phones go, I think this is one of the best looking phones on the market right now. I really like how the edge kind of just wraps up into the camera bump to have that really nice silver aesthetic there. I think it looks pretty sleek. But looking around the outside, we'll start off on the right side when you're looking at the front of the phone. We have our classic buttons. Samsung's had them over on this side for a while now. The volume rocker and then the side key. The side key is essentially your power button, but it's going to be something you can remap. So as we're usually seeing with Samsung devices, you can remap it to open Bixby or any app you want, maybe Snapchat, for example. You can open your camera, and of course you could power it off depending on how you choose to set that up within your settings. On the bottom of the phone, we have our speaker on the right side. We have our USB Type-C in the middle. Obviously, again, no headphone jack on this phone. We haven't seen one in years. And to the left of that, we have our SIM tray and another microphone. Now, I've been told that the microphone in there is actually turned 90 degrees, so if you accidentally poke it with your SIM tray poker, you shouldn't damage it, but I would still be careful and try to avoid poking that hole. You want to make sure you get the right hole when you're trying to take your SIM tray out. It's weird that Samsung put them that close. On the left side, very clean, nothing there. You can see the marks for the antenna, and on the top we have our microphone. Now on the front, this is the second thing people were actually complaining about. We have a 6.2-inch Super AMOLED screen, 120 hertz. So far, that sounds great, right? But the catch is, it's limited to only 1080p. And again, this is something that I don't particularly see as a big drawback. I know a lot of people wanted that Quad HD display that we saw on the S20, so it's weird to see a downgrade, but at the same time, last year, you had a choice anyway. You could either have Quad HD at 60 hertz or 1080p at 120 hertz. And being that the difference between 1080p and Quad HD on a screen of this size was not as significant as the difference in screen refresh rate, I always chose 120 hertz anyway. So this screen experience is essentially identical from my use case. So 120 hertz, 1080p, I think it looks really good. I have no complaints about that. On the top, we have our hole punch camera. And just as a side note, I actually will be, you guys might be wondering what the other differences are between this and the Galaxy S20 from last year. I will be making a full side-by-side comparison. It's probably going to be my very next video. So if you're watching this, you're new to the channel, consider going down and clicking the subscribe button so you don't miss that video. Now, if you're watching this later, just check on down, maybe I'll link it in the description and you guys can see, maybe I already made that video. But with that being said, the screen looks really good. So physically speaking, guys, I don't really have any complaints with this. The two drawbacks were the plastic back and the lower resolution screen, but both of them I think are a good way to cut cost. Some other things to note with this phone physically that you can't actually see. On the back, of course, we have wireless charging and reverse wireless charging, so you could charge up like your earbuds on the back of your phone. Really cool feature. You don't see that on iPhones. It's one of the reasons I really like these. On the front end, we have our fingerprint sensor underneath the screen. This is an ultrasonic fingerprint sensor, and this year, it's supposedly better and larger. From my experience, I'm just so used to the S20, I'm getting pretty good at that, but I did notice that it does seem to, maybe it's just how I registered my fingerprint, it seems to work really well. I like the fingerprint sensor, I never seem to miss it, and it just works, almost every single time I'm using it. And then looking under the hood, we have a Snapdragon 888, the newest processor from Qualcomm, and really the best you're gonna see on any Android device out there. This also has Bluetooth 5.0, not 5.2. I don't know why they didn't make that upgrade, so it's a little bit less future-proof than the Ultra, but it's the same boat that we're seeing with the Galaxy S21 Plus. I'm not sure why Samsung chose to put just 5.0 and not 5.1 or 5.2 in here, but, whatever, that's what they did, I guess. And while we're on the subject of downgrades, they also have less RAM, so only 8 gigabytes of RAM. Maybe they did some surveying and realized most people don't need 12 gigabytes. I'm not entirely sure why they did that. Regardless, 8 is not leading the pack, but it's definitely going to get the job done. You have 128 gigabytes of storage. On the base model, you can, of course, upgrade that. I believe it's like $50 to get up to 256 gigabytes, but you don't actually have expandable storage. So you see the SIM tray on the bottom is just a SIM tray. You no longer have any room for expandable storage. This is another thing people really complained about, and this is one that I would say is actually grounded. Personally, I don't really use expandable storage on here. I would rather pay for OneDrive or something, but I know a lot of people that would like to use that expandable storage. So not having that on here kind of sets us back a little. But again, we don't see that on iPhones anyway, or a lot of other phones out there. So Samsung's kind of been like the last one holding on to that. Of course, this is IP68 water resistant, so drop it in water, you should have absolutely no problem. And then I guess one other thing to note is the display on the front is actually a flat display. So unlike what we see on so many of the previous S models like S20, the S10, and keep rolling back to like the S6 Edge, this one does not actually have that waterfall edge, which personally, I really like that it's a flat display. The waterfall edge was cool when it came out, and I really liked it for a little while, but it had its drawbacks. It was really annoying, honestly, to try to type because I kept having some palm issues. Like every time I would reach my thumb over farther on the screen, my palm would hit the bottom corner, and I ended up changing the keyboard or doing something stupid like that, and it really got annoying. So having the flat display, I think is a pretty welcome change. Of course, if you have your phone face down now, you can't use that edge lighting to kind of have like a little green ring when you get a phone call or a blue ring for a message. That was nice before, but overall, the pros and cons, I think a flat display is going to be better. Now, one other thing to note with how they actually cut cost on this phone, in the box, they don't have a charging brick. This is something that people are very upset about, and of course, you can go out and buy a charging brick, but this is what we're seeing now. Flagship phones no longer come with charging bricks. We see Apple did this first, Samsung made fun of them, now Samsung's doing it, and I'm sure we're going to see this trend continue with many other flagship phones throughout the year. So with that being said, guys, let's jump into a camera test. Like I said, we have 4 cameras on this phone, the selfie camera on the front, and then the 3 on the back, so we'll get into some videos and photos to see how well it actually performs. So starting off, here's the ultra-wide camera, and overall Samsung improved a lot. It's a much lower saturation than it used to be. Here's the wide angle, but you will notice that the shadows look especially blue in the snow. I'm not sure really why they did that, but here's the telephoto lens, and again, the sharpness looks really, really good. The trees are a natural color. Here's the 10x zoom, still very usable, and as we dial it into 30x zoom, it's more usable than it used to be. It's really not that bad, but obviously you're not going to print this out. Here's live focus view. This one is essentially portrait mode with the rear camera. My skin looks a little bit too saturated. The selfie camera has much more natural skin tones. And when you go to live focus mode, again, it does an excellent job. I think this actually does one of the best jobs for blurring the background very, very accurately. And just as a side note, I'll actually be posting all of these photos on Twitter. So if you guys want to zoom in and actually look at them a little closer, go check out my Twitter at Mike O'Brien with 2 N's, and I'll share these photos there. Okay, so this is a video with the S21. Again, I'm walking around and it's really pretty smooth, not shaky. But we could go back to the ultrawide as you see here, and the mic zooms out. As we zoom in, it's going to sound like I'm getting farther away. So we go to 3x zoom. And again, pretty stable, surprisingly stable. It looks really clean, nice sharpness, overall great color. And as we go over, let's bring this pole into focus. Looks like it focused really pretty quickly. A good natural blur in the background. Overall, I think this looks pretty good, but let's see what it sounds like if you're recording like a person and the audio is on this side. Again, without a microphone right next to the cameras, we're gonna see how this actually sounds using the microphone on the top and the bottom of the phone itself. So leave a comment and let me know what you guys think, how this audio sounds to you, and that's it for the video test. Okay, so this is the video test with the selfie camera. Just let me know how this sounds and looks to you guys in a comment below. But honestly, I mean, it's doing a great job. Like, there's obviously the sun right behind me, and it's still like I'm not a total silhouette. So it's doing a really good job of the dynamic range, the color. Overall, I'm impressed with this. So overall, guys, the Galaxy S21 regular is a phone that, although it has a lot of new features like the newest processor, in a way is kind of a step back, which is why it's an interesting comparison I'll be putting out between the Galaxy S20 from last year and the S21 right here. So, I mean, like I said, you're gonna have some trade-offs. You have a better processor, but you have less RAM. You have a plastic back versus a glass back, but there's a lot of things like that. So with that being said, guys, definitely check out that video. But looking at this phone individually, I mean, honestly, I really like it. I think Samsung did a lot of things right here. I like how they dialed the cost back a little bit, making this a more competitive phone. And the drawbacks on here don't really bother me. I don't care that it's a plastic back. I don't care that it's the same resolution that I was using before anyway with 120 Hertz. And I don't usually use SD cards anyway. But I mean, there are a lot of great things with this phone. The processor is very fast. We do have that 120 Hertz screen. We have all of the usual flagship stuff you want to see. And the cameras on here honestly do an excellent job. I really like how even though the hardware is not especially different, Samsung is doing a lot right with their software now. So they're finally catching up, and they're not oversaturating photos. They're not over softening photos. I think they look really good. So the Samsung Galaxy S21, I think is a pretty solid buy. It gives you all of the flagship specs at a much lower price. And I think it's a pretty easy phone to recommend. But you guys can leave a comment and let me know what you think of the Galaxy S21. Is this a phone you would be buying or recommending to friends? Or are there too many drawbacks? What do you guys like and dislike about this phone? And as always, guys, if you enjoyed this video, consider liking and subscribing. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.